believe that in a microcosm form, in the New Detroit experience, after some 15 months of people from the highest reaches of economic power to the lower reaches of so-called powerlessness, by being able to express and to communicate, we feel that this has resulted in remarkable progress. Those who are in a position to actually affect change must do things that convince the so-called powerless of sincerity. This takes a number of forms. For instance, by having the man who is so powerful to take positions on very, very unpopular causes which are appealing to the so-called powerless. By having those who are in positions of economic strength to put their money up to finance institutions and causes that might be appealing to the so-called powerless. I think that you have to really change the dialogue and the communication into positive acts which convey a sense of sincerity.
We hear about the problem of rising expectations that's connected with this. How do you counter that?
The best way to counter it is really not to promise anything. And to really let your performance and your deeds speak for themselves. Don't get out and say, look here, I'll promise you the moon, or I'll promise everybody a certain standard of living or housing or things of that nature. But work on these things and let the results begin to speak for themselves.
And I have thought for some time that perhaps some of the laws that we have, or the ordinances that we have at the present time, should be more enforced, and that the traffic, particularly to the speeding of the pickups, light trucks, and the heavy trucks, should be enforced.
You're also very concerned about trucks weaving back and forth and staying in the wrong lanes rather than the right lane where they're
Well, that was more or less the lighter trucks, pickups and such. And I noticed that I've seen this quite often. I watched them, and usually it's some young person, perhaps that doesn't have an automobile of his own, and it gives him an opportunity to try to burn off a little, as most of the young kids try to do nowadays. And they don't realize that these trucks are as dangerous as they are, and it's weaving in and out at a tremendous speed that they are using is of a great danger, I feel, to everyone on the turnpikes. I would like to see us do whatever is necessary to enforce our speed limits of all vehicles. I'm not asking that it be slowed down as a speed limit, but that our speed limits be enforced.
You try to get the broadest cross-section of all of the expressive viewpoints in the city that you possibly can. And therefore, you must start really with the voices that are generally regarded as the most powerful, people that represent economic power. And then you want to establish a dialogue with those areas that are generally described as being alienated. And so you try to get a cross-section of those voices too. And then you put them in a melting pot and let them confront one another. Well, I think that a town like ours, as perhaps the appearance that many cities have, is on the surface everything appears to be very, very good. But I believe that the great failing of cities that have this feeling is that people are so inoculated from communication with disparate voices. And I believe that every city should try to maintain that communication to get a real reading as to the temper of the city. And that if you don't get that reading, you may be in some danger.